Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is...
Ray Skywalker.
Oh,
No, my
Ray,
name's Jim.
thank you for joining us. And we watched Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker.
The colon is the important part. And
It's the
we've said
important
it
part of the
before.
title.
We've said it before, but look, you've got to say it long form or it's just not the same. So
It's not the same.
Look, this was my movie today, so I will do our synopsis in case you had forgotten the events of Rise of Skywalker. So are you ready, Ben?
I could never forget the events of Rise of Skywalker, but yes, I'm ready.
Emperor Palpatine has returned, hiding on the planet Exegol with a massive Sith fleet. Kylo Ren tracks him down, but Palpatine offers him the ultimate power if he kills Rey. Meanwhile, Rey, Finn, and Poe search for a way to Exegol, following clues from the deceased bounty hunter/assassin named Ochi. Along the way, Rey learns that she is Palpatine's granddaughter, while Kylo tries to turn her to the dark side. After a duel, Rey mortally wounds Kylo, but then heals him when Leia sacrifices herself to reach him. Rey faces Palpatine alone, but Kylo arrives to help. Palpatine drains their power, but Rey, with the strength of past Jedi, destroys him. In the process, Kylo sacrifices himself to save her. The Resistance defeats the Sith fleet, and Rey later buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers on Tatooine, calling herself Rey Skywalker.
Look, that's pretty simple. Not much else to say. Let's wrap it up.
I actually went a bit. I did use the old Chat GPT for the synopsis help, as we often do. But I was unhappy with its first few attempts. That is multiple prompts to get to that level. I was like, no, I really want something that tells me where we went and why we went there. Like, it was just, I felt that was important because of the flow of the conversation that was to come. But
before our conversation flows too much further, let me get into the particulars. Released in 2019, directed by J.J. Abrams, Star Trek 2009, Super 8, and Star Trek Into Darkness. Written by Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams. Just want to point out, Chris Terrio has written some divisive films. I'm not going to go too far into that, but yeah, people don't like it. Starring, this is maybe one of our longest starrings, but here we go. Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Adam Driver, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Anthony Daniels, Naomi Ackie, Domhnall Gleeson, Richard E. Grant, Lupita Nyong'o, Kerry Russell, Kelly Marie Tran, Ian McDermott, and Billy D. Williams. Now, accidentally, we have now watched 3 Ian McDermott films.
Yes,
he may be one of our most watched actors. So yeah, it's just a little interesting fact. Budget of $416 million, box office of $1.077 billion, which I do have some interesting facts about as well. I learnt something about the Star Wars franchise and its box office, and it's something that bucks the trend of almost every other film released. Do you know what that is, box office-wise? Normally, internationally speaking, the box office is about between 60 and 70% international takings and about 30 to 40% domestic US takings. Star Wars is almost always a 50-50 split, or very close to it. Star Wars does a lot stronger domestically than it does internationally. And it's just, a lot of people put that down to the original Star Wars, when it was released, became a cultural phenomenon within the US. But it took a lot longer to reach other markets, namely places like China and Southeast Asia, which are huge movie markets. So they don't have the nostalgia of growing up with Star Wars the same as a Western audience does. So like places like China, for example, which is the second largest movie market in the world, just don't gravitate towards it at all. So yeah, it's kind of really interesting that there's that really kind of cultural split along Star Wars. But yeah.
I guess it's a historical franchise, really, too, in that sense. So it's that idea of sort of it was a very American phenomenon, wasn't it? Like, if we look back at like the '70s and even the
Oh,
'80s.
when you think about like just toys and merch, and for years like comic books and cartoons and Christmas specials, it was just the American audience, and to a lesser extent like the UK and Australia, were bombarded by Star Wars. Like it was on their breakfast cereals, it was on everything. But obviously it didn't get the same treatment in other markets, so that when you come to modern Star Wars, you don't have that same kind of instant connection of I've got to go watch a Star Wars film. Yeah.
Well, some of us do,
Oh
some of
yeah,
us.
yeah. Some of us will never stop.
So your journey with Star Wars, then, Ben. Obviously, I know it, but the viewer slash listener base may not. So,
Yeah.
what's your Star Wars? What's your Star Wars credentials, if you like?
My Star Wars credentials were as a small child being shown Star Wars by my parents or my dad, and having it basically taped off of TV. We had these things called VCRs back in the day, and I had basically TV edits of the three, 4, 5, and 6 chapters of Star Wars. Even though back then we had no inkling we'd get a 1, 2, and 3, or a 6, or a 7, 8, and 9. But yeah, so, and then I graduated to, like, there were these VHS copies that had like an interview by Leonard Maltin at the start, and I graduated to those. And I've just followed it all the way through: prequels, sequels. And look, I love Star Wars. I consume just about everything that is Star Wars. I consume the TV shows. I am very aware of the quality of some of these products. And we'll get into that because last year I did a mega rewatch of all the Star Wars films. And when I say all the Star Wars films, I mean all of them.
I made you not skip any.
Yeah, including the Ewok films, which are better than some of the main canon Star Wars films. No, that's not true. They're awful. But yeah, so I have definite opinions on Star Wars. And one of those opinions, which has been going for the last 12 months since I watched this, is that Episode 2 is the worst Star Wars movie.
So
And
divisive,
yeah,
Ben.
look,
So
I'm
divisive.
I'm so locked in and it's not funny. But yeah, we can get into that later. But that's my journey with Star Wars. And look, the prequel series, there are definitely things wrong with them, but in general, sequel series. But in general, I find them fun. There are fun things to be had, and I definitely went into them understanding that, hey, it's not going to be my Star Wars. It is new Star Wars. New people are making it. New stories are being told, and it's for a different audience. And I think that kind of really helped me push aside the weirdness in parts and like the things that didn't necessarily connect 100% with me, and allowed me to kind of just enjoy them for what they are, which was new Star Wars. That is my journey.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you left out that I would include in your Star Wars journey is you were a big what they used to call
Yeah.
expanded universe guy.
Yep.
So that was this series of novels that really got going in sort of the early '90s and sort of really sort of caught fire where creators were, with the permission of Lucasfilm, writing all of these novels and expanded material, mostly set after Return of the Jedi. And you read, I want to say, almost all of that. Like, you really
Yeah.
consumed almost all of it.
I maybe missed one or two like standalone books, but all the main series I've read. And look, there is some amazing stuff in my opinion in those books. There was also some complete trash. Like the power scaling, if we want to go into that, for what Jedi become is ridiculous. They're too strong. But yeah, look, and I think that may be another reason why I enjoy some things in these films. So, for example, the Return of the Emperor in this film, I much more easily accepted that because that's what happens in the books.
Mm.
It happens in a different way, and obviously they lead up to it a bit better. But I was like, oh yeah, that happens. That's the thing. Um, there's a whole like 30 books, not 30 is an over exaggeration, of a series that is basically a war between an external universal threat called the Yuzon Vong, that you couldn't really make into a film. You could make it into a really cool TV series. But yeah, like I love the books, and I'll defend them till my last breath. But just as my opinion on the sequel series, they couldn't use that stuff. Like they had to sunset what they had there. They had to control what they used judiciously. Otherwise, we would have got something a lot worse than people think we got.
Yeah, I guess so just to be really quick, my sort of journey with Star Wars was fairly similar in that it was the VHS. I was introduced to the movies, the original trilogy, if you like, at the age 7. Huge part of my childhood, huge part of my teenage years. Star Wars fanatic, I would say. I read a, a bit of the expanded universe stuff, not as much as you, but I did enjoy what I did read of it. You got to remember, this was like, you know, the sort of early 2000s. It wasn't that easy to get every single book, or like, you know, get lists of what series you're up to and that sort of thing. So, but I certainly enjoyed it, and very much that core 6 movies I absolutely adored and loved. And although at the time I had some mixed reactions on, I guess, the prequels, particularly episode 2 at the time when it came out. But look, yeah, huge Star Wars fan, and that is sort of one of the reasons I picked this movie, was because I was like, you know what? It's been a minute. It's been a minute since Rise of Skywalker came out, and I thought it was time to look at it again. Obviously, you can find 8 million hit pieces on the internet if you want to, saying, things about this movie that are not very nice and, aren't even necessarily related to the film. But what I wanted to do was be like, yeah, but what's the movie like? Like, it's been a second. So I was very much, this movie was a roller coaster for me when it came out, because my journey with the sequel trilogy, being a huge fan of Star Wars, was I loved Force Awakens. So that was the first sequel movie. I saw that. I was trying to remember. It was definitely 3 times. It may have been 4 on opening day. I literally did the thing that, where you go to the first session of the day, you exit, and then you instantly go back and watch the next one. Like, and that was just because I enjoyed it so much. Like, I had such a good time. I had, in a weird way, I had no expectations. I hoped it would be good. I was excited because it was Star Wars. But then when I actually saw the film, I had such a good time. Go to see The Last Jedi, and I came out of Last Jedi, and at that point, I had such a conundrum on my hands, because the film fan in me could not help but recognize that this was a well-made movie. I was like, this is a very good movie. The plot works, the character arcs work, the film critic in me was like, yes, I don't have a problem here. But the fan in me didn't know how to feel. So I walked out, and I remember walking out of that film and saying to my friend who I'd seen it with, I think it was good. I think it was good. Yes, it was well done, And then I kind of went home and got mad, because I think, like so many people, like, well, much as I tried to be very mature about it, in the sense that this was a good movie, the plot, the characters, the arcs, yes, Jim, it all works. Like, there's no problem here. The fan in me couldn't handle it, and not in a not in a petty way. I just was disappointed. I didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, when I really considered it, what the way the characters were treated, particularly the legacy characters and bits and pieces. So then that brings you to Rise of Skywalker. I was ready for some fun. I was ready for some big Star Wars stuff here, and in the cinema, I was super on board with the first 30 minutes. Now, if you like, okay, where does that get you? The first 30 minutes
Not
gets
very
you
far.
not that far, but it does get you to, I guess, the speeder chase in the desert. And basically, the movie slowly started to go a bit sideways for me post speeder chase when we get down in the snake cave, and through the whole middle section, I sort of I struggled a bit in varying degrees and was sort of like, what are we doing? What do you mean there's another transport? Chewie, what? Force lightning? I don't know what? And it was just sort of all. And then I was like, and where's Rose? I was just like, all these things
Oh,
kind of just,
poor Kelly Tran,
I
man.
know. So this happened a lot. And then so the middle section of the film I started to really struggle, and then I quite enjoyed the finale, the last 40 minutes. So and I think that that initial read for me, even 5 years on, is pretty much still accurate. I have a good time for the first 30, then it gets real messy, and it stays messy for most of its runtime, and we kind of do bring it home in a pretty nice way for the finale,
Yeah, look, this film, from a film's point of view, I think it has a few issues, but one of it is pacing, right? It loses itself for a good portion of the movie, and I think there are some reasons from that a lot of people understand. Of the creative vision for these three films was not solid.
Yeah, I was like, what are you going to say next when you say the creative vision
Yeah,
for the films?
it was not solid. It was murky. It was chopped and changed. And look, if you know anything about George Lucas, he did that a lot too, but he was one person.
Yes.
So when he chopped and changed, we kind of didn't notice that much. But when you're chopping and changing, not necessarily the vision, but the person who's having the vision, that really messes stories up, especially stories as big and as grand as Star Wars. The real kind of, I've been thinking about this ever since the sequel trilogy released. In my opinion, they tried to do too much and they tried to do it too fast. Like, you think about when A New Hope kicks off, you're slowly and gradually introduced to characters in a way that your brain has time to assimilate them. And look, we start in the middle of a story just like we start in the middle of a story for the sequel trilogy, but it's less jarring because there's a person added, there's an element added. It just feels like building blocks. This one, man, the tower feels like it's built in wobbly when we start. There are so many pieces, there are so many people, there are so many plot threads that we're expected to catch up with that I think the average audience struggles a bit.
Are you talking specifically about Rise of Skywalker here?
Well, Rise of Skywalker has this most egregiously.
Yes,
Um,
I would agree with that because, again, like I said, I saw Force Awakens 3 times opening day. I think one of the things that you're talking about there, I think, is what I would sort of say that The Force Awakens did such a good job at setting up not only a standalone story for itself, but also several plot threads that really the job of the next two movies was to pull at those threads that were established in
yeah,
The Force Awakens. And Last Jedi in particular took things in a complete right angle direction and it ignored or abandoned several plot threads that were introduced in Force Awakens, which then meant that if you wanted them resolved, Rise of Skywalker had to do a lot of that work and try and resolve a lot of these things. But at the same time, perhaps if it had focused on that as its primary job, we might have been okay. But Rise of Skywalker continued to add
Add
characters,
things.
continued to add mysteries, continued to add plot threads. And it was a little bit like, no, but this is the end of the series. We shouldn't be introducing all of this new stuff that we then are going to pay off when. And I guess the answer is never. We're never going to pay it off. It's not going to
I mean,
come
like,
round again.
The Mandalorian has attempted to answer peripherally a few things about, I think, look, we've kind of beat around the bush a bit. The Return of the Emperor is ridiculous.
Yes.
Like the idea that, and how it's hand waved. Oh my gosh, how it's hand waved. Like the start of the film, they get a piece of information from an insider who we find out.
Not even that.
No.
The opening crawl literally says, so
Yeah,
the
true.
first thing we see in the movie, the dead speak, and then there's a paragraph that hand waves a message from Emperor Palpatine has gone out across the galaxy. And you just have to pause there. We're not even out of the first paragraph of the opening crawl before you're like, wait, did the Emperor announce himself to the galaxy? Why would he do that? His fleet's not ready. We find out at the end of the movie, it can't even get off the planet. Why would he announce himself? Why wouldn't he get the fleet out of the atmosphere? Why is he there again? How long's he been there? Instantly.
And when you consider that his character is, in lore-wise, one of the most intelligent and devious characters in the entire universe. Whether you have to hand wave a bit of it, but he organized Order 66. He organized the Purge of the Jedi. He orchestrated all these things from behind the scenes to then suddenly come back as a brute force character who's just like, nah, we're just going to kill everyone. We got big ships. It's cool. Like, it's weird. But yeah, like in universe, so we learn about this before the characters learn about it. But in universe, like they have this meeting, and like, oh, what was the news? The Emperor's back. That's how it's treated.
I think Dominic Monaghan, who is in this movie for a few lines,
Friendship is magic.
Literally says, dark science, cloning. And I'm like, that's it. Dark science and cloning, man.
Yep.
Like, so, so yeah, it's a struggle, isn't it? Like to actually, get to a place where you're okay with the Emperor being back and all it means and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a struggle. But then also, and I've talked about this as well, they did this sort of gymnastics plot-wise to have Carrie Fisher in the movie. And I remain so mixed on this because it is one of those things where they said that they used her performances, her unused performances from Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. That was a really big deal in the marketing at the time. And I should point out that technically, on a technical level, it's incredible what they managed to achieve, match moving cameras to existing footage and trying to write dialogue that then would make sense for what she was reacting to. But it is a completely constructed performance that absolutely ties their hands. There's only so much you can do when that is your approach. And I think ultimately, in hindsight, particularly now, here we are a few years on, I don't think it was the best move. Now, hindsight's 2020, so I freely admit that at the time, it would have been a very difficult problem to solve as to what do we do here, because Carrie Fisher has passed away and she was going to be a big part of this movie. Ultimately, I think it probably hurts the movie to do what they did. And the only thing that would have been worse would have been to completely CGI her character or deepfake it or something in order to make it happen. Now, deepfakes, I don't even think were a thing at the time. So,
not in that wording. It was a conundrum. Like, it was a difficult problem because the three of them were constructed in a way that each of the three main legacy characters had a movie. And, the first one was Han's, the second one was Luke's, and Leia's was to be the third. She was meant to be that kind of pivotal legacy character in this film, and they lost that. They lost it 100% because of the tragic passing. And I don't know what the answer is. We can pontificate and speculate all we like, but until we'd be able to commit our solution to film, we could never prove it. But yeah, it's icky. I, in general, am not a huge fan of using people's likenesses and voices and performances after their passing unless they have specifically provided for that themselves. Like, for example, in Star Wars themselves, James Earl Jones has signed his voice likeness to Disney in perpetuity. He's like, I can't keep performing this role, but hey, I will sell you my voice likeness. Give me some extra money in my final years, and I don't have to worry about it. So we get Darth Vader forever, right? They can create and manipulate his voice how they wish in those terms. Carrie Fisher didn't have that opportunity. A lot of actors haven't had that opportunity because obviously the technology wasn't there when they passed. So it's a weirdly slippery slope, right? It's a bit macabre, I think is the word.
Yeah, and I think ultimately for Carrie Fisher, it was fairly safe. She was a very cruisy individual in that
Yeah,
sense. And also, there was some precedent for this because she had already seen a younger version of herself, and she actually signed off on it for Rogue One. She was shown that footage of, a double basically acting as her, and then they CG'd her face, and she was
wasn't
like,
it her
"Yeah,
daughter?
I don't know. I don't think for that one it was. It was her daughter for Rise of Skywalker,
Yeah,
but I don't think it was her daughter for Rogue One. I can't remember those. So there was some precedent there, and I'm sure she would have been fine with it. She was, by
yeah,
all accounts, a very cool individual with that sort of thing. But at the same time, whether she was fine with it or not, I don't think that was actually a good solution for this movie. And yes, it raises those moral quandaries as well. So, but it really tied their hands, and they also said that apparently this is why Kelly Marie Tran had limited screen time. Now, whether you believe that or not, apparently she was supposed to have a lot more scenes with Leia using this sort of archived footage thing, but they had an awful lot of trouble getting any of it to work, which doesn't surprise me at all because it would have been incredibly difficult to have the lines that she has previously recorded out of a completely different context make any sense whatsoever with new material. So yeah, whether that was the case or not, Kelly Marie Tran is hardly in this movie, which I think I missed her character. I missed Rose in the film because Rose was a love it or hate it. The movies went in a certain direction, and Rose was a big part of The Last Jedi. And I thought it was a good character, and I thought it was well acted, and it made sense. And I expected to see more of this character, kind of like Lando. Lando gets introduced in Empire Strikes Back, and then we see more of Lando in Return of the Jedi, and he's part of the crew. And that was what made sense to me for Rose. And then Rose is treated the exact same way as all of JJ's friends, if you like, who are just
yeah.
in Rise of Skywalker for a couple of lines here and there, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. What do you want me to say? I did not like that. I would have liked it more if that character had have, been along the journey, part of the crew. And if it is true that she had a lot more scenes with Carrie Fisher and they had to cut them, then that's just a shame because no one wins in that situation. The character doesn't win, audiences don't win. It's not ideal.
Um, the only other major problem I have with this film is it's a bump on the law, if you will. And there are lots of things to bump on the law in the sequel trilogy that a lot of people will dig deep on and all that sort of stuff. But mine's a bit simpler in that it's their treatment of, for those of you who aren't major Star Wars people, the Sith. Um, there is a common knowledge that seems to exist post Jedi of the Sith and what they were and what they were about. That they're no longer boogeymen. They're no longer the deep, dark, scary. Like, they were kind of Voldemort before Voldemort, right? People didn't want to speak of them because they were gone and you didn't want to tempt fate and all that sort of stuff. But in this film, like, there's the whole 3PO thing of, like, he can't speak the language because it's been locked out of his programming and it's illegal or whatever. And there's, like, all this sort of stuff. But all the characters seem to have this passing familiarity, at least with that the Sith are a real thing, right? That it irks me for some reason, because there's no way, for example, that this would be common knowledge in the galaxy. The galaxy's such a big place. It's such an immense location. And, you know, a lot of people wouldn't know that connection with the Empire. They just wouldn't. And yes, you can say these guys are rebellion, so they might have a bit more, but it still feels wrong. It doesn't. The Sith should be a mystery that needs to be dug up, not in the way they do in this film either. It should be a mystery that has to be uncovered, or Luke should have some notes that explains it, or something like that. I don't know why it irks me so much, but it just doesn't.
They got the
sit right.
Jedi texts from, you know.
But that's not where they get the information from. That would make sense, right?
You got to be careful delving into fanboy nerd out here, you know.
Oh, I'm melting down, man. I'm melting down. But look, side note on that stuff is, like, that's the weakest part of this film, is that mid-journey to discover Exegol, to find the holocrons, to find the path along it. And when they deal with that Sith stuff, it feels the most wishy-washy and weakest. And I think that may be part of it as well, right? I think they're just trying to get from A to B, and they kind of just, they go as fast as they can. And because they're going as fast as they can, they kind of just keep skipping along without worrying about the implications of what they've created.
It is actually a little bit like, towards the start of the movie, you know, Poe has this sequence, which is a pretty cool sequence, where he introduces something new, which is light speed skipping, right? And I kind of feel like the plot is light speed skipping right through that center passage, where it's just sort of like, let's just cover it with some pace. Let's cover it with a new character. Let's bring someone in. Let's move to the next plot point. And it's all of this stuff, you know, which is just sort of getting thrown at you. And it's not really doing the job of smoke and mirroring the idea that there's nothing here, you know. And it's just, it is kind of just a shame there, because they have some real work to do. They have some plot work to do to actually pay off some of the things from Force Awakens and some of the things from Last Jedi. And, you know, unfortunately, by sort of covering it with this pace, and with covering it with, here's a new character, and here's a new character, and here's a new planet, and here's a dagger, which you know, can sort of
somehow exactly take the shape of a crashed thing that the dagger was built before.
But before you think about it too much, light speed skip to the next plot point. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, wait,
like,
cool, healing. That's cool. That's new.
What, she's already on the skiff? Okay, whoa. Cool. Off we go. And again, it sounds like I'm being very negative about it. And there's enough people out there who just simply rag on the film. But I do love that first half hour, and I really like the finale. I think the finale is great. So we were close here. It feels like we were close to actually a really good movie. Look, somewhere in here, there is buried a good movie which really does cap this trilogy. I just struggle to see it. And I think as well, I struggle to enjoy this movie in the way that I will put other Star Wars movies on and enjoy them. In fact, I would say Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker together, I've seen the least of all of the Star Wars films, the main films, that is, including those standalones like Rogue One and Solo. I've seen Rise of Skywalker and Last Jedi the least, because every time I watch them, I walk away with thinking about these problems that we're discussing today and lamenting a little bit. And I don't want to do that with Star Wars. I just want to enjoy it, you know?
And look, amongst our friendship group, I'm very famous for just being forgiving of most Star Wars property. I can usually enjoy anything that is Star Wars, because I think I'm a bit lucky. I have that ability just to tap into, I think, 10-year-old Ben and go, that's cool. And, I do that with this movie. Uh, I've ragged on it. I've picked it apart. I've told you things I don't like, but I've never watched the movie and not enjoyed my experience. Now, and I understand that enjoyment comes with caveats, and I understand that my nerd brain and my geek brain kicks it apart. But I can still sit there and go, man, this is Star Wars. I get ship battles, I get mystery, I get lightsabers, I get these kind of cool things, and they are cool to my brain. But I also just have that dichotomy of, I get it. I know why people don't like this film. But here's the trick to it, internet. You can not like a film. You don't have to be toxic about it.
It's true.
Like, you just don't. Like, you think it's enjoyable for you. I can guarantee you it's way more enjoyable to try and enjoy things because it's positive. And that's my journey with Star Wars. I have decided that I'm going to try and enjoy everything Star Wars. And I think I have a better experience because of it. I have friends who don't understand that. But that's my choice, man. Like, and I've confused you in the past, Jim, by going, yeah, it's not great, but there's this cool thing that's in it, that this lightsaber fight or something like that. And then you're like, but I haven't watched it because it's really bad, and now you're tempting me to watch it. I go, but it is bad. Like, and I tell you it's bad, but there's this thing, or there's this thing. There's always a thing in it that you can enjoy, especially with Star Wars.
I think watching this one again, and this is why I wanted to watch it for the podcast, because I didn't really feel like I wanted to necessarily watch it again personally, but at the same time, I'm like, but I love Star Wars. So let's give it a crack. It's been a while. And I think I might take a leaf out of your book for this film, because the thing that I walked away with on this rewatch was, I was like, you know what? Once, for me, not for everyone, but for me, once Rey gets to Exegol, really from that point to the end of the movie, I enjoy it. It's a good time for me. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll do your thing and just take that section, and maybe I'll just be like, every now and again, I'll just be like, I'm going to just chuck that on because that's got some cool stuff in it. And I have a good time, watching that sort of finale of these movies. But look, a mixed bag from both of us for Rise of Skywalker. I don't think time maybe did the thing that I thought it might do, where I was sort of like either just doubling down that, I really don't like this, or going the other way and being like, you know what, time's mellowed me. It's totally fine now and I'm good with everything. I actually feel pretty much the same as I did when it came out, which was, it's kind of messy. This one,
It's a mess.
But there's a bit to like there as well. So, but look, thanks for joining me on the Rise of Skywalker journey. Why don't you tell our good viewers and listeners where the journey can continue on social media, and then you can tell me what we're going to watch next.
Well, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, two friends started a podcast. And if you want to watch that podcast or listen to that podcast, you can do so in a couple of places. If you type in Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures to Spotify, YouTube, or iTunes, you will 100% find us. When you do find us, like, comment, subscribe. If you want some ideas on what to comment about, tell us what movies you love. Tell us what movies you forgive. Tell us what movies you go into just looking for enjoyment. And we'll add them to our wheel, we'll add them to our list, and we may watch your movies. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so in two places: Instagram, Jim_and_Ben, and TikTok, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Alrighty. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off of this one. It's going to be no clues. It's going to be no preamble, except to say this is a movie I have watched 10, 15 times. And I have flip-flopped between liking it and not liking it.
Okay.
And I'm curious to see where I land this time. We'll be watching Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh, right. Well, look, I love that movie. So there you go.
I have loved it too. I don't know why my brain does this with this movie, but that's why I want to watch it.
It's your Rise of Skywalker. Do I like it? Do I not? I don't know.
I love it. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, that wasn't worth it.
Well,
But
look,
anyway,
I can't wait. I love this thing. So always there for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. So, and hopefully you will be too. So we'll see you all next time.
thank you so much, and may the Force be with you.